Paul Nunes. I'm a certified professional facilitator from the IAF, which stands for International Association of Facilitators. Since 2018, I've started a book series on architecting collaboration, and my latest book, in co-authorship with Martin Duffy and other renowned digital facilitators and guest co-authors, is titled Beyond Virtual Meetings. It's all about the importance of the digital tools that can extend and augment the power of you as a facilitator and a meeting host in virtual online meetings, but also on the hybrid meetings that are going to be so much needed in this post-pandemic era. Along with my co-author Martin Duffy and esteemed PhD colleague, we host Talk to Your Meeting Doctors, a series of hosted conversations with meeting experts that can advise you about how to transition to this new normal and take advantage of this incredible once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to make the organization of your meetings more sustainable and effective. Please stand by as the next show will start momentarily. It's great to be here directly from the London Excel. I'm attending this week the meeting show, and that's the reason why we are hosting this Talk to Your Meeting Doctors, episode 6 here directly from London. Welcome, dear guest speakers, and good morning, Martin. It's great to be here with you again today.
Yeah, good to see you again, Paul, and a very warm welcome to Dan and Bo from we're gone transnational again, Paul. We've Dan, Bo, if you want to tell us where you're signing in from this morning.
Yeah, I'm signing in from Copenhagen. So yeah, Denmark.
And I'm in Germany at the moment, although I don't usually spend more than 3 days in a city.
Hey, good plan. And I'm coming from home, I'm afraid, today, so I'm not getting to do any exotic traveling for this one, Paul. We might have to fix that for the next trip.
Yes, absolutely. But we are lucky to have here two prominent figures within the event industry, so-called, now it's originally MICE, Meeting Incentives Conference Events.
meeting industry currently. It's a huge industry, as you can watch from the videos we just played before this show, and it's where we are so pleased to have Bo Krüger, someone that's been dedicating his life to meeting events, as probably is going to share a little bit extra about his life in a few minutes. And also Dan Brand. Dan is a person that I follow, I admire tremendously. He created a new word for MC, right? So MC, Master of Ceremonies, is what Dan is an expert on and excel. He has a very, very busy life, an international career, and we are lucky to have Dan with us here today, taking your time for your busy schedule. And I suspect that we haven't even started earlier this morning for you to take a flight to somewhere. I don't know. But Martin, we normally start our conversations with a question for our guest speakers.
Yeah, just an open question, guys. We always like to wonder if there's something about our guest speakers that is not very commonly known, but that you might be willing or happy to share with our listeners, just by way of introducing yourselves.
I'll jump in here. So I've had 6 near-death experiences.
Wow.
And one of the great privileges, I would say, of having a near-death experience is that you appreciate life more. And I mean more than just like doing good things or getting nice food or being around people you love. I mean like pursuing purpose, because then you realize how fleeting and how short life really is. And it gives you a much deeper appreciation. My near-death experience has also been pretty exotic. 2 of them involve wild animals in the middle of Africa. My very first giving me my namesake of Daniel, which is facing off against a wild lion. But then I've also had a few other near-death experiences around the world. So I would say something that is lesser known, but is a driving force behind why I do what I do, is that I know that life is short. I want it to have meaning. I want it to have purpose. I'm pursuing it with all the passion in my heart. I move faster than most. I usually talk faster than most, but I'm purposely talking slower this morning for the sake of our listeners here. And it's all because life is short. So what can we do with the years that we have left to have the greatest impact? And for me, that has been in the meeting space, because ultimately I'm all about human to human connection. I'm very excited about AI. I'm very excited about future. All my events are at the intersection of innovation, technology, and the future. So I am actively building the future, but I never want to lose sight of what's most important, which is being human.
Absolutely. And let me cut here, Martin, for a moment, before obviously you're going to ask same to Bo and also give Bo more time to think about something. But I was impressed when Dan actually makes a question to actually look in the eyes of all the participants he has in his meetings and salute them or say hi or something. That's incredible. And it tells a lot about the person who Dan is.
Thank you so much, man. Appreciate that.
Bo, anything you could share with us?
Yeah, there could be many things. I just start counting how many near-death experiences I had, and I'm running out. I'm getting closer to the 9 as well, so time is running out. So we better do this quickly. But apart from that, I've been playing improvised comedy theater for 25 years. So I thrive more than most people when you have to improvise, which is a paradox, because the meetings and event industry is obsessed with planning all the details. So I actually feel very comfortable when the plans breaks down. And because I think that's also where you often find moments of authenticity, and I think that's often where the most interesting things happens. So I also, when I design meetings or are an MC, I try to make space for unexpected things to happen, because I think that's where the human side also really showing itself. Whereas sometimes we overplan, and things can become a little too strict and too artificial in many ways. So yeah, improv comedy theater, I bring that with me everywhere. You realize when you start playing that you can use it for all of your life. So so it's also a philosophy for life in many ways.
Yeah, that's a really interesting. It's a really interesting segue actually into our theme or topic for today, because the idea of spontaneity in meetings in general, versus the creativity that comes from potential spontaneity is really rich. So this idea of meeting events, and Bo, you very eloquently brought us into the almost rigid structure, organization, pre-planning that comes with meeting events, versus there's an equal level of pre-planning, but I would almost say habit. Let me put it that way. With organization meetings, they can become so routine that they're not actually particularly planned. As a start off, what do you think are the key differences or similarities between meeting events versus organizational meetings?
I actually been working with organizational meetings for many years. That's where I started before
Yeah.
moving into events. What I see, what we are really good at it in the event industry is especially the logistics and the planning part, planning all the details, and also creating experiences. So there's a lot of thoughts around how can you create a great experience, and how is staging the whole event and creating moments of peak moments that you will remember afterwards and so on. Where a lot of internal organizational meetings, they are, as you said, Martin, they are very much run on habit. So we do the same thing all the times, and we tend to be maybe sometimes too loose around it as well.
Yeah.
The good thing, however, is they're usually smaller, so there's more space for conversations and interactions. Yeah, so I would say, so they're more, maybe sometimes they can be very rigid and boring, but sometimes they're also very unstructured, which is sometimes good and sometimes bad. So.
Interesting. Yeah. Dan, from your perspective?
Well, just to stir the pot, because I think it makes for more interesting conversation, let me tell you the two first things that come to my mind as to what they both do wrong.
Yeah.
And so one is what Bo is just saying here, which is fear of change. I find that if it's an organizational meeting, if they have always kept it loose, they continue to keep it loose, and they're afraid to put structure. Or if vice versa, if they've always been structured, they're afraid to become creative. There's a fear of change, and it's exactly the same for big events. Or we always have the stage in the front of the room. Why not have it in the back? Or why not have it in the middle? Why not have it suspended upside down? I don't know. But there's just no tolerance for such conversation. Oh, it's always the CEO that starts the meeting. Okay, is that the best for the meeting? So there's a fear of change. I would say that exists in both spaces. The second thing that I believe exists in both spaces is a focus on content and not experience. I think what people don't realize, which is why I moved into the world of emceeing and moderating and not into the world of keynote speaking, although I do a decent amount of that as well, is I believe that when you engage a person, then everything else happens. So just because I have the best design PowerPoint does not mean I'm going to be able to communicate what's on the PowerPoint unless you give them an experience first. Just because I have organized the biggest convention center, if the ticketing outside does not work, well, that person's not going to be inside and see it. So I think there's way too much focus on content and not enough on experience. I think organizational meetings maybe even more so, because at least with bigger conferences and conventions and trade shows, there's, because it's a different space, a physical space, there is some experience built in with that. You travel to a new city or you enter some new doors. But if you just join a Teams call or a Zoom call, I don't think anyone is thinking, what is the experience of the participant? They're only focused on the content. So those are two things that I think they both do wrong. Very, very wrong.
Interesting.
Absolutely, absolutely. I remember I attended a corporate meeting, and it was an important meeting, and everybody was in that video conferencing. No one cared about that experience, and that in fact impacting the meeting results in the end, right?
Absolutely, 100%.
Why is that? Why is there insufficient attention to the experience? Although, Bo, you made the point that a key part of events is generating a memorable experience. So is that something that we could borrow, beg, or steal from the events and bring it more to the fore in org meetings?
I mean, I think Dan is right in many ways. There's too much focus on the content in many ways, and also we tend to do the same, and there's a lot of risk aversion as well. But then at the same time, I think I work with a lot of agencies, event agencies, and I think they think a lot in creating meeting experiences, but it's mainly in the way you wrap the event and not so much about how you work with the content and how you engage the participants. In that part, you could do much more. But we know from experience, research, and psychology that people tend to remember peaks and endings very much. It's very important for the overall impression of an event. And for example, in organizational meetings, we don't put attention to that at all. Actually, most endings in organizational meetings are really bad because there's no wrapping up. We don't end in time. Half of the people have left the room. There's no way we thank people for their contribution, and we don't say goodbye in a nice way, and so on. Whereas in many events, not all events, but many events, we are better at doing this. But I totally agree with Dan. I think the best way to create a better meeting, and that goes for both types of meeting, is by engaging the participants more. So I work with the concept of moving participants from spectators to creators, because I have this idea that we live in this crazy, wild, unpredictable world where we are facing these wicked problems all the times, and we cannot rely on experts and CEOs to tell us what to do. We have to find our own way. And the only way you can do that is by making the participants co-create solutions. And you can use maybe the meeting as a festival where great minds can meet up, and you can maybe inspire them to have better talks, but at the very end, they are the ones who have to find the solutions. And we are really bad at doing that at both types of meetings today.
At both types of meetings. That's an interesting observation. Dan, would you share that view?
Yeah, I mean, so I do about 80 to 100 conferences a year. On 4 continents. And so I see a lot of patterns. I think for me, it's not even making big changes, it's making small changes. So for example, the two of you as moderators, as planners for today's session, there were some things you did very well. I received a personal message from Paul before, just saying, hey, we'd like to have you involved. He told me a little bit about it was not just a link. He didn't say just join us if you can. He made an effort to make a connection. And then yesterday, a video was sent to give a bit of context about the environment in which this session would be happening. So all of that is sort of priming the best out of Bo and myself. So these are, for example, good things. You'll be surprised how many events don't do that, where they just speak to an agent and say, can you bring that speaker? Or you write to a staff member and say, hey, can you do a presentation at this time? And then that's it. There's no real support or context giving, anything of that sort. But I'm also talking about taking to another level. So for example, Bo here is talking about the end of a meeting. And Martin, you were also sharing kind of how you would end today's meeting. As an introvert, I don't just go from, okay, meeting ended, leave. I take a little bit more time to process, and I actually like to process things. Most events, so when you click end to this session, it ends, and then I'm just back to my emails or something of that sort. Why haven't events or even organizational meetings that happen in a virtual setting, which can be translated in-person setting, just give 3 minutes after a meeting ends for reflection. You know, just play some music, and just tell people you can close your eyes, you can pace around, you can write something, do whatever you want, but process what you have heard. Because most of us cannot just click, 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 go from one thing to another. Now, because of my job as an MC, I have trained myself to do exactly that, to go from performing on stage, to then going backstage and going immediately into production mode with the mics and, you know, all those guys over there, and then to go into the green room and meet the next speaker and be hospitable and welcoming and calming for them, and then right back on stage. I've learned how to do that, but I actually think there could be something really healthy, because what I've learned is those sections between the main stage and backstage is my place to prime myself to not be the "what are you guys doing" to the mic person, because that's not their vibe, that's not their energy, that's the energy of the audience. But do organizations really think about, or even before a meeting, where they say, you know, come 5 minutes early, we're going to put some meditation music, just be zen, be at peace before the meeting begins. Nobody cares. I personally have not met a single organization that cares about the emotional priming or the emotional even aligning, you know. So say you're going to do a big celebration. What does the organizer of the organizational meeting do to make sure that everybody is in that celebratory mood? Do they do anything? Do they send physically in the space? Do they do something different? Emotionally, do they prime them anyway? This is what I mean by experience. These are not massive differences, but I think they would make a massive difference if people just thought about it.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Can I? Yeah, yeah. What I hear maybe also in what you say, Dan, is maybe about onboarding. Like we do in an organization, we know to onboard people into an organization makes them work efficiently much faster, and also creates retention so they stay longer in the organization. And so I hear a little bit what you say, Dan, to work with speakers like that, but you could also do that with the participants. I know ICA, International Congress and Convention Association, they always, when they have their annual Congress, they have an event for newcomers, people who are there for the first time. So they actually teach them how to be at an event like that, which is huge, and you can easily get lost. So you have experienced people telling them what is the best way to network at an event like this, what can you achieve, and they also do a lot of internal networking with those newcomers. And I know from Martin Sierk, who used to be the CEO of ICA, he told me that when they evaluate afterwards, the ones who ended up having the best experience from the annual Congress were actually all those who joined that onboarding event. So maybe that's a line of thought we could think of. How good are we actually, both at the events, but also in the organizational meeting, at actually onboarding people? Because people in organization, you go from one meeting to another all the time. So how do you help people switch their mood, switch their focus, so they can be present in that particular situation and give the best they got? I think there's something there which could be interesting.
Boy, you've prompted me in what you've just said there. You've prompted me to think about this key difference between events and organization meetings. So the events happen irregularly, but are, let's call it, big scale. So this idea of investing considerable time and effort in preparation, in the onboarding and so on, that all intuitively makes sense to me. But if we translate that into the routine, day-to-day, very frequent meetings that happen in an organization, so any of the senior officers in any organization, they'll typically have anything from 3 to 10 meetings squeezed into their day. Is it realistic to actually try to apply the principles or the concepts that both of you are talking about, the idea of onboarding in whatever format, we can come to the detail in a moment, or the winding down, the closing out in a different way? Or or is the grumpy old CEO who's looking at counting the beans, is he turning around and saying, "Oh, look, just crack on, just get on with the bloody meeting"?
But I think, yeah, I think you can do it at both types of meetings. However, at organizational meetings, it might just be a short thing, a few minutes. So what often happens in organizational meetings is that you forget to tell the participants, why are we having this meeting? I mean, what are the objectives of the meeting? And you forget to tell them, why is it important that you are here and how can you contribute? So many people, they sit at meetings and they don't understand, why am I here? So I often hear the comment, I'd rather get this meeting over so I can do my real work. And that happens if you don't understand why you're there. So it might only be a few minutes and nothing more than that. And also another thing, when you research on what are the main problems on organizational meetings, you often hear that people don't come not prepared enough. And I heard that Amazon, I never tried it myself, that Jeff Bezos at his meetings, he always starts a meeting with having people reading the meeting material because he had the assumption they don't have time to prepare the way you would like them to. And I think that's the truth. I mean, you can tell people a million times they should come well prepared, but they're too busy. And personally, I often only start thinking about the meeting 5 minutes before I enter the meeting room because I just came from something else, which was equally important, right? That's another way to onboard people. Maybe start the meeting by actually get people on the same level. So
interesting
idea.
That
right there is great advice from Bo, because it's the little things, right? So rather than saying, so imagine the scenario where the CEO says, who's read the material? And then a third of the room raise their hand, the other 2/3 don't. Immediately, just by that question, you made 2/3 of the room look and feel stupid. Now they are bringing that sense of inadequacy, ill-preparedness, whatever, guilt, shame, busyness, anger. It's a negative emotion. It's not a positive emotion. Now 2/3 of the room have a negative emotion, and that is absolutely felt by the 1/3 of the room. And the person who asked the question is not impressed. Now, just with that one opening question, you have created an experience that is negative. On the other hand, what Bo is giving as an example, possibly true from Jeff Bezos, is that on the other hand, they say, I know it's a busy day, but how about this? For the next 3 minutes, everybody open up to this page, read it real quick, and then we're going to have a conversation about it. Amazing. For the person who's come prepared, they've now got 3 minutes to just calibrate again or refresh. And for those who haven't prepared, they're going, phew, thank goodness, because I do want to contribute to this meeting and I do want to be prepared. This is what I mean by like micro differences and attitudinal changes that I think create significant changes afterwards. You know, it's like the CEO in an organizational meeting that is inclusive. You don't have to be. There's many ways to be inclusive. And also some meetings, some organization meetings are just to communicate a certain message, you know, to get a word out on something. But when you're inclusive about it, there's buy-in, there's ownership, there's a desire to participate in whatever it is you are saying. On the other hand, if it's just a talking shop where it's a monologue, you know, that people don't feel as included, they don't also feel as excited about whatever it is that you're saying. It's the same with big events too, you know, that's the space that I'm in. And in big events, they think, oh, if we just have the best speakers on stage, it'll be a great experience. No, it's everything. It's literally the coffee line, right? Because if you're waiting 40 minutes for a cup of coffee, you're having a bad experience. It had nothing to do with the speaker on the inside. It has to do with how long you're waiting on the outside for your cup of coffee. If the food is not good, it's a bad experience. If the ticketing is, if it's poor, most events I do are like 3 to 10,000 people. So ticketing and logistics is a big part of it. That experience starts in the parking lot. You know, if you cannot find good parking space, or when you get off the metro or the subway, if you cannot find the venue, you are having a bad experience. It is a responsibility of the organizer to start thinking from that point on. It's the same thing for me. The experience I create for the audience does not begin when I get on stage. It's 10 minutes, 15 minutes before I get on stage. So I'm very intentional about the music that plays in the room. I'm very intentional about the lighting in the room. I'm very intentional about what's on the screens. I'm very intentional about, are people outside or inside? Because in doing so, I'm preparing them for the best experience. I'm usually pretty high energy when I come on stage. And trust me, the very conservative business crowds I speak at are not high energy publicly. They may be high energy privately and in the office spaces, but not in a setting like that. So how do I get them within seconds to smile, to laugh, to clap hands? It's this priming, it's this conditioning. It's exactly the example that Bo gave, which is just to meet people where they're at and give them a chance to elevate. I have seen even little things like events where you have even just a nominal makeup artist that puts a bit of powder on your face. I'm not even talking extravagant makeup, just a bit of like powder so you don't look sweaty on the cameras. Even that, what that communicates to the speaker is, we want you to do your best. It doesn't really have much to do with the makeup itself, but it's just saying we care about you looking good, feeling good. It's also the difference between saying, would you like a cup of coffee or tea before you begin versus, all right, you're on in 2 minutes, right? It's these micro differences that I think actually make significant changes. And it doesn't matter if it's a small meeting of 12 people, which is a meeting I had yesterday with my team virtually online, or whether it's a big conference like the one I'm going to today with 3,000 people. It's the exact same thing. The better you engage your participants and your speakers, the better you think about their emotional well-being, the more you think about the experience of it. You know, like right now, if we had classical music playing in the background over this podcast, it would create a certain feel. If we had funk music, it would create a whole different feel. And all we did was change the music. I'm thinking about that, Martin, because you got instruments in the background. So I figured that you understand that even something like beats per minute creates a different experience, right? I'm also looking at Paul's background. Paul is in a hotel and he's dressed real smart, looking really good. I like it. So he's bringing that presence. On the other hand, I'm staying at a friend's house and I'm about to rush off to this meeting right afterwards. And it's a very different feel, right? I had a very nice breakfast with a dear friend. I feel very at home. I'm wearing a t-shirt. I feel safe. I'm in a place of warmth, a place of where I belong, a place of intimacy. So even our physical environment creates very different vibes. Paul's probably ready right after this to go to the expo that he was talking about, you know, and maybe as he walks out of the hotel, he's going to meet some of those people. So that's a very long answer to say, please think about the emotional well-being and the experience of people, because that's how you bring out the best. You don't bring it out by an agenda. You don't bring it out by PowerPoint. You don't bring it out by the size of the room. None of those things matter, and yet that's what most people think about. It really is about, how are you doing? How can I get the best out of you? Review. It is as simple as that, and going through that thought process and then creating the mechanisms that allow for that to happen.
So there's a sense that I'm getting from both of you actually, that there's attention to detail, but it's not the conventional detail, logistics, content on the agenda, structure of the agenda. It's the attention to detail that I think both of you are alluding to is to the person, to how the person is feeling, to aligning the person's emotive state with where we're trying to go in the collective within the meeting space itself. Am I reading that correctly?
I think it depends. I mean, taking care of the experience and the details can be good to some extent, but you can also do it too much. So if a room is too perfect, I think it makes you less creative and less prone to actually interact with other people, because it gives you the feeling that you have to be perfect too to be in that room. I actually saw research showing that people are more creative if they enter a room which is slightly messy instead of a room with perfect symmetry and where all details are in place. And I see a lot of event planners, they are obsessed with perfection, and I'm not sure that's a good thing. So, but then on the other hand, we don't want chaos. But I think a good ideal for what an inspiring meeting room could look like is if you think about nature. In nature, you have a lot of details, and it's in a way it's messy, but then at the same time it's integrated, meaning that you have all these details. No one really planned it, but it still fits together in a nice way. So it calms you down and it inspires you. So for me, a nice meeting room is a mixture of well-planned, deliberate, done things, and then at the same time give license for things to happen and maybe not try to be too perfect. So I rather have a meeting or workshop in a workshop room instead of an old castle where you have like gold or things on the wall and stuff like that, where things get too perfect. And I think actually we create environments that are not really for humans, but very often because we are so obsessed with the perfection. And I think it comes back also to the risk aversion part. We are so afraid of making something we perceive as mistakes. And we think when things are not perfect, we are making a mistake. But maybe we are only making a human space. So maybe it should not be perfect. Maybe that's what we should strive towards. So I don't know if that makes sense.
That makes total sense to me anyway. I guess, and I hadn't really thought about it from that point of view before, this idea of having things perfect versus your nature analogy creates a picture in my mind that fits beautifully, that something can look chaotic, a bit like a garden that's planned but grows naturally, and you can see the planned bit, but you can equally see the bit where pieces overlap and kind of grow together, that nothing plans that's just spontaneous action. So is that something from the events space then that we could try to bring into the organization meetings? Like, Bo, you made the point earlier that sometimes events planners, they're hyper vigilant about everything being perfect. On the other hand, Dan, you made the point that part of your prep work is to socialize with the people, not even at the very start, but 15, 20, 30 minutes prior to the event. So is there something there from the events piece where the structure, the organization, but equally this sense of creating possibilities for people to do different stuff? Is there something there that we can try to bring mindfully into organization meetings?
For sure, 100%. So just to tag team on what both said over there, my comment about details is not about perfection. It's about intentionality. There's a difference. So you can focus on details to make it perfect. And I would agree with Bo that perfect is not necessary. In fact, some of the best moments, and I always tell clients this, my favorite moments are when things are not working out as planned. But there's a difference between focusing on details to get things right or get things perfect, and focusing on details to be intentional about it. So what I mean by that, even using his analogy of nature, many years ago, Martin, I can hear from your accent that you're Irish. Is that correct?
Correct. Absolutely. Yep.
So many years ago, when I was living in Ireland, I had the great fortune of working for the Ministry of Jobs, Enterprise, Innovation, then called Ministry of Jobs, Enterprise, and Innovation. And we were talking about how to create environments and ecosystems for innovation. And then the analogy was a farm versus a rainforest. A farm is built for scale. You can't grow the amount of potatoes or corn or tomatoes or whatever you want in a rainforest. It won't work, but it works very well on a farm. And there's something where it's focused on efficiency, and it's focused on, return on investment and getting the environment just right and controlling all the ingredients from light to rain and everything else, the soil texture. But nothing new grows on a farm. On the other hand, the rainforest is the environment where innovation happens. You don't know what new species are growing. You don't know what new connections, what new symbiosis is happening between different species. What I mean by details is knowing ahead of time what is needed, a farm or a rainforest. What's the environment you want to create? That's what you got to be intentional about. Because to me, what doesn't make sense is that you put people on a farm and then expect innovation. That's not going to happen. Or you put people in a rainforest and expect them to focus and to scale something. That's not going to happen either. So just a tag team that actually, I do think the devil is in the details, and it's about being intentional about it. There's no right or wrong, and it's not about getting it perfect, but it's about being hyper aware of all the details and what it could cause, and then using that to your advantage. As far as what you could learn from, what organization meetings could learn from larger conferences as such, again, I'm going to keep coming down to this because I started with this, and this is my driving point, which is, as humans, we got to focus on the human touch and the human experience. And so, for example, events are very stressful spaces. Everything about it is stressful. The logistics, the staging, the size of the venue, everything is very stressful. And as much as it would be probably safer for me to hide backstage and to just collect my thoughts and prepare, I have found with experience that if I rather position myself at the door and welcome people with big high fives and handshakes and hugs, not only is it great for them, it's also great for me because it reminds me why I'm on stage. I'm on stage for them. And invariably, I make some friends. And Bo, from your world of improv comedy, this is probably true as well for what I do as an MC. But I have to read people very quickly. And even that brief greeting as they come in, I know which one's a little bit more relaxed and which one's a little bit more stiff, which ones I could use as a prop, for a little back and forth, and which ones I can't. And so it actually enhances my ability too. But actually what it is just being welcoming. And you would be surprised how zero of the events I work for have ever asked me to welcome people in. And yet it is probably one of the biggest differences, because when people then look at me on stage, they don't look at a stranger, they don't look at a performer, they look at someone, they go like, oh, that's the guy that greeted me at the door. Oh, that's that Dan. And then they're super excited. They're already warmed towards me. I don't have a cold experience where I have to prove my worth. You'll see a lot of speakers will spend a lot of time in the beginning establishing the credibility. I've achieved this, I've achieved that, I've achieved that, I've achieved that. It's amazing how just a hug or a big smile matters way more than your titles. Titles will be forgotten. And also, honestly, doesn't matter. You're in your position today, you'll be in a different position tomorrow. Sure. Doesn't matter at all. But I think it's Maya Angelou that says people forget what you say, they won't forget how you make them feel. And so that's the stuff that I start focusing on. So it's that little thing, but it's the same thing here in an organizational meeting. Imagine the experiences that you bring people in and you don't think about anything. And the first thing they do is they sit around a large oak table with these big, massive boardroom style chairs. Well, do you then expect them to be interactive and fun and lighthearted? Absolutely not. Being seated is a lower energy form than standing. That's why some startups do standing only meetings. So imagine they enter a room where there are no chairs, and now they're forced to stand and maybe talk to someone. Imagine they entered a room that is bright lit with fun music. They're immediately going to be primed to be in a better, higher energy state than a dark room with no windows, with a single light in the middle of an oak table, a large, massive table with massive chairs. So it's these things that I think make actually quite a lot of difference. And so what you could learn from the event world is along the same tools that events use: lighting, sound, production. Do you have a standing slide that just says agenda, and then the 9 o'clock, 9:10, 9:20, 9:40? Or do you have a conversation topic like share with someone today XYZ? Honestly, to me, that makes a big difference, because one says sit down and focus, the most important thing is we're going to tell you, and the other one says talk to each other, the most important thing is you.
Think about it. That's good. Guys, believe it or sorry, Bo, go ahead.
I would just going down Dan's line of thoughts here. So There's from New Zealand. There's a researcher called John Hattie, and he looks at meta studies on how do people learn in school. So he make a list of what interventions are the most important ones to make kids learn. And on some of the list I've seen, the number one is actually, what do the teachers think of me? Do they believe in me? And what you said there, Dan, makes me think of that by greeting people and making them feel comfortable, you kind of take also ownership to the emotional state of the room, and you help people relax. So the way I look at an event is that you have a lot of people with different emotions, and they can be against you and they can be for you. So I want to win that battle. So I want them to have on my side, and I want to create a safe space for everyone. So every time I win one over on my side, then we can create a better event. So by greeting people and get close to them and get eye contact, it's very likely they will feel more relaxed and they will like me better. So then I kind of can help transform the room and hopefully take out whatever kind of fear is in there, because there's a lot of fear when people enter a large room with a lot of people they don't know. And you have to help them, make them feel safe. So I totally agree, Dan. I think it's a great strategy, and I think it should not only be the speaker or the MC doing that. I mean, there should be a lot of people contributing, the whole staff, and maybe you have ambassadors in the room, I don't know, but everyone should help doing that. And as a facilitator, that's what I try to create, that kind of atmosphere all the time, also known as psychological safety from Amy Edmondson. You probably heard about that term, that's the most productive and safe environment for people if they feel psychological safe. And it doesn't happen all by itself. You have to really work deliberately or intentionally to make that happen.
Guys, believe it or not, we're 50 minutes into our conversation. It feels like 5 minutes, but it's been extremely rich. We normally try to wrap up with a very quick 2-minute summary, so I'll do my best to do justice to a very rich conversation here. But interestingly, both of you finished up in both of your comments there with the idea of creating space for the unexpected. And that's where we actually started. That was one of your earliest comments or observations, Bo, that if we create space for the unexpected, we have the possibility for creativity that we may not have anticipated. Mm-hmm. However, when we look at events and regular organization meetings, events are predominated by logistics and organized, with the potential to have too much rigidity around detail, where routine organization meetings are just that. They're routine, they're habitual, and the risk is that they become so habitual that we lose sight of some of the personal details that might give best effect to engaging the kind of the hearts and minds, rather than this rigid adherence to the content and the agenda. And I think that was a point that both of you made at the early stages, was this idea of less focus on pure content, more focus on the emotive state, with a view to getting the best out of people in their creative sense. The concept of engaging the person first was the next theme or topic that we talked about. So again, rather than focusing on the surroundings of the meetings and the pure logistics, that if we look for the hearts and minds from the get-go, we have a much better chance of getting much more out of the event or organization meeting that we're doing. You made the point, and both of you again made reference to this, was trying to move people from being spectators to being participants. And Dan, I think it's really interesting, that idea, because I had this experience only yesterday myself at a one-day meeting that I was organizing, the idea of meeting and greeting. So the meeting doesn't start when the first slide goes up. The meeting starts 10 minutes before the start time as people are arriving. And I remember standing and shaking hands with people and just saying, hi, hello, you're welcome. And I could see the effect that had on people just going, oh, okay. It's kind of, and you not zen, but you get this energy, you feel this energy slightly opening up from being rigid to just people calming. So that's something that maybe organizations can focus on a little bit, to say, find ways to move away from people being spectators at meetings and move them more into being genuine participants. The idea of priming, Dan, you brought us into that idea of priming and using prep time well in advance of the meeting, long before the meeting, using even small interactions to get people psychologically into the space that you want them in when the meeting is taking place. Bo, you made an interesting point that brought me back to a colleague that Paul and I have in Australia, the question of why people attend the meetings. And interesting, our colleague in Australia, he has meeting quality is the name of his application or tool, if you want. And statistically, from his research, which is extensive, really extensive, 13% of people don't know why they're attending a given meeting in organizations. Now, the analogy I like to use then is to say, okay, so we could improve our productivity by 13% instantly by excluding those people out of the meeting, in theory. But the point is, Dan or Bo, your point, I think, was, if people don't know why they're there, and if we haven't set it up at the very outset, why are they there? Why are they important? Why do we need their input to this? We've lost a key opportunity to prime the person to be the participant rather than to be the spectator. Dan, I'll kind of finish with your point. And I love the analogy of the farm versus the rainforest. You know, and what you expect from people in the environment that you bring them into must be tempered with that environment. You can't expect to grow tomatoes in the rainforest, and you can't expect spontaneous, massive creativity on the farm. From both of you, I think what I'm hearing is focus on the human touch. When you focus on the human touch, the rest is much, much more likely to follow.
Very well summarized, Martin.
Very well, amazing. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for following us and watching this amazing episode. I learned so much. I hope the same for you. Thank you so much, dear guest speakers. Dan, lovely summary. Perhaps we wrap up with key takeaway, Dan, Bo, and we close the mics.
Bo?
Golden nugget from this conversation.
What my golden nugget is?
Yeah.
I mean, many things. It's interesting. I like the idea that it was a very improvised open meeting. So it forces you to really listen to what is being said. So what often happens is that if we're too much in our plan, we don't listen to the world outside. We try to remember what's in the plan. And I think this is the core of a good human conversation. So I like the format. And one more thing. I like when we talked about the setting of the room, that I now look into 3 different rooms. You have 3 different settings, which is very interesting. And mine is super boring. It looks like a parking lot, but I'm actually in my kitchen here, so, which is more interesting.
Thank you, Bo. Over to you, Dan.
So first of all, my thanks to both of you, Paul and Martin, for organizing this. It is one thing to have a network, it's another thing to use that network for the betterment of others. So thank you for taking these conversations that you could have and do have privately and sharing it, and all the work that goes into organizing it and editing it and publishing it. So first of all, thanks for that. And Bo, how wonderful to meet you and to hear your story as well. I am very curious now I love stand-up comedy. I love improv comedy. I love comedy. It's universal. You know, it's just like how I use music. It connects diverse international crowds in the same space. There's something about laughter that makes people relax. And so I love your space and I love your contributions today. My golden nugget kind of final thought on this is be intentional about not just bringing your best self, but helping others bring their best self. And whether that's in environment, whether that's in a hug, whether that's in a question asked, whether it's making eye contact, whatever it is, let's not be selfish about our mindset and expectations, but let's be very inclusive. And it really doesn't matter if it's an organizational meeting or whether it's an event. Care about the well-being of others. I promise it'll help with your whatever you want to measure, return on investment, revenue, conversion. All those things are secondary. But when you engage the other person, when you create an experience for the other person, when you value the other person, that's when the magic happens. So be intentional about doing that.
Thank you so much. And it's all for today, and I think a lot. Thank you, Dan, Bo, Martin. Good to see you again, and let's stay tuned for next
Thanks a
episode.
million.
Yeah.
Appreciate
Great
it,
meeting
guys.
you, talking to you
Cheers.
guys.
Talk to you all soon. Bye bye.